And thanks for watching this fourth and last video on concepts, population and cases. The first one was an introduction on the relation between concepts, cases and population. The second one dealt with the operation whereby you try to attach a given case to a particular concept, and we have seen that there are many possibilities of choice for doing that. The third video focused on the relation from concept to cases through the attributes and the indicators. In this last video, we focus on the relation between concepts and population. This problem is particularly important when you are busy with an comparison. Suppose you want to study two organizations, one in the US and one in Europe. You want both cases to fall under the same population so that you can analyze these through the same concepts and the related literature. This requires to adapt your concept, and that's what this video is dealing with. Concept has two properties. Intention refers to the strictness of a definition. You can always define a concept more or less strictly, right? It can be loose, it can be strict. The extension of a concept refers to the number of cases a concept encompasses. Normally, the intention and the extension are negatively correlated. If you have distant cases, that is, cases showing much differences between them, you need a looser concept to study them. Otherwise, if you have a strict concept, you will have one case in your population and another one outside your population, and comparison will be impossible. Similarly, if you have quite close cases, you can go for a concept which has a stricter definition. Please note in reference to the last video that there are two ways of decreasing the intention depending on the kind of concept you are busy with. If you are working with a necessary sufficient concept, adding definitional attributes to your concept will increase the intention, and it will, of course, decrease the extension. But with family resemblance concepts, that is, concepts such as the one of welfare state, which is defined by a list of attributes, and where the cases, in order to be considered as an instance of a concept, have to comply with some of these attributes, well, with such concepts, you will increase the intention by subtracting attributes. Okay, here is a chain of concepts ranging from abstract concept with high extension and low intention to quite concrete concepts. Concrete concepts means they have a more strict definition, but the cost for that is that they apply to fewer number of cases. The point I want to make here is that you may want to choose the concept in this chain depending on the cases you want to compare. So, for instance, if you want to compare Iraq and UK, you can consider UK as a democracy, but probably you cannot consider Iraq as a democracy. Therefore, if you want to compare both countries, you need to study them through the concept of political regime, right? Both cases would comply with the definitional attributes of a political regime, and probably you would have a case around this pole and another case toward that pole. Iraq and UK are quite distant cases, but let's now suppose you are working with closer cases, such as US and UK. Both are democracy, So actually you can go towards a less extensive concept and a more intensive concept. You can move down the abstraction ladder because your cases are closer. Right? The concept of democracy projects a smaller population than the one of political regime, and both cases normally comply with definitional attributes of democracy. Probably US would be close to the presidential democracy subtype, while UK would be closer to the parliamentarian democratic subtype. Let's suppose now you are going one step further, one step lower the abstraction chain. You are now comparing Belgium and UK. Both have a political regime. So of course you could analyze these at this level, but this part of the typology won't be useful for you. So you can go one step behind. You can go toward democracy. But democracy encompasses two subtypes, presidential democracy and parliamentarian democracy. Since both of these countries are parliamentarian democracies, this seems the right conceptual category to study these two cases, right? You would probably have Belgium close to the proportional system subtype and UK close to the first past the post election subtype. So the point I want to make, and you see there is always one case similar over there. What differs is the distance between UK and the other case. The smaller the distance, the lower the position on the abstraction ladder can be. Right? If you want to study distant cases, cases where the context will be much different, you need to go up the abstraction ladder. Okay, if we now only take the right side of the conceptual tree, the former slide, we get this. So you have the intention as independent variable, meaning the strictness of definition. You have extension, population to which the concept applies, and you have here the chain of concepts whereby that one is a subset of this one, and this one is a subset of democracy, and everything is a subset of political regime. Depending on your case, you will take a different position on this abstraction ladder. Okay, there is another way actually to encompass distant cases, and this is called conceptual stretching. You will have noticed that when you are moving up and down the abstraction ladder, the name of your concept changes to accommodate the different cases. Right? So if we go back, we were talking here about parliamentarian democracy, that is democracy plus an adjective, and here we even change the name of the concept. And most people would like to study everything through the same concept. Conceptual stretching allows that. Conceptual stretching means tweaking. It means tweaking the definition. When you do a literature review on the concept of democracy, you will find some differences in the definition of this concept. Some will retain more attributes than others. Right? So it is possible for you to fine-tune somewhat the extension of your concept by adopting a stricter or looser definition of a concept with the same name. However, there are many limits to this, and I actually do not recommend you to use it so much. I think to compare Iraq and UK, it is better to climb the abstraction ladder than to overstretch the concept of democracy. Because many people would object you, is Iraq really a democracy? Can we really analyze these two cases through this concept? And you would have probably much difficulties in answering that. So as a rule of thumb, I would say you can go for the loosest definition of a concept that exists in the literature, but you can never delete essential attributes of a concept on your own, right? So, for instance, if we want to compare Iraq and UK through the concept of democracy, we probably need to delete some definitional attributes related to human rights, at least. Well, if you look at the literature on democracy, every author agrees that human rights is an essential component, a necessary component, actually. So you should actually not delete this attribute, and it is better in that case to go up the abstraction ladder and to compare both countries with the concept of political regime. Finally, there are ideal types. Ideal types have three attributes. Ideal types are concepts with the highest intention possible. They are defined on the most detailed way possible. The name ideal type speaks for itself. It means it is a model, it is an ideal situation. Logically, because intention and extension are inversely related, ideal types have zero extension. It means that there exists no case in the world that comply with all definitional attributes of an ideal type. It's because it's an ideal situation, a model, right? So normally, it's impossible to perform any study of any case with an ideal type, because no case complies with the definition of an ideal type. However, their use is widespread in social sciences, especially in management studies, where you have so many best practices or ideal situation of very successful companies having achieved so much and providing a benchmark for other cases. And that's precisely where ideal types are useful as benchmark. As benchmark from which one can measure the distance. So ideal types, and this is the third definitional attribute of an ideal type, is that ideal types are always measured on a continuous way. It means that you can actually compare Iraq and UK through the concept of democracy. But then you need to make the concept of democracy an ideal type. That means you define it on the strictest way possible, and then you measure the distance of both countries vis-à-vis these ideal types. You have cases more or less close to it. So to conclude this short video, how can we study distant cases such as Iraq and UK through the concept of democracy? You have three options. The first one is conceptual stretching. It consists of adopting a loose enough definition of democracy so that both cases can comply with the definitional attributes. But you should be very careful with that, and you should never go beyond what the literature accepts, right? There is a consensus in the literature to say more or less what democracy is, and you should respect that. You cannot call democracy something that is not. So be very careful with that, but taking these limitations into account, you are free to choose the loosest definition in the literature to accommodate quite distant cases. A better option is to move up the abstraction ladder. It implies that you don't compare UK and Iraq through the concept of democracy anymore, but through a more abstract concept. More abstract means a concept with less intention and more extension. Such a concept could be the one of political regime. Moving up the abstraction ladder is a zero-sum game. You lose much conceptual precision, right? Because you have lost many definitional attributes. But you gain applicability. You can keep you can actually compare UK and Iraq, but the cost therefore is to lose this precision, to move from democracy to political regime. And the last option, which is actually quite popular, is to shift to a continuous measurement, or to consider democracy as an ideal type. In that case, you keep the best of both worlds. You keep a very precise concept of democracy, the most precise concept possible, actually, and you are capable of comparing both countries through that concept. But there is always a cost, and the cost is that you need to invest significantly in proper measurement device, because you will have to argue that Iraq is, let's say, 20% democratic, while UK is 80% democratic. So you will need to invest in indicators and in measurement. And since you have only a finite time, this comes at cost of other good parts of your research. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.